Okay, so hopefully I got all of my little computer glitches out of the way here, and you should be able to hear me now. So my topic will be about international law as it relates to the law of the sea or maritime law. International law is one of the major staples to international relations. It makes it easier for citizens of the different states around the world to travel. It regulates trade between nations, and it establishes the rules for which soldiers must follow on the battlefield. There is one portion of international law, however, that is both complex and expansive, because it deals with the vast majority of the earth that does not belong to any one nation, the law of the sea. Although the law of the sea has been gaining in its importance as the years progress, there have been several principles to take hold within its ranks. Many of these principles begin with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. One of the biggest issues concerning the law of the sea brought during these conventions was establishing territorial waters. It establishes that all internal waters, naturally like lakes and rivers or bays that are clearly jutting into a state's territory, belong to that state, and that territorial waters may be extended up to 12 nautical miles from the shoreline of a state into the ocean or the sea. Within these territorial waters, a state has the sovereign right, if threatened, to attack any vessel that violates their territorial integrity. So, I mean, we see kind of instances of this more with the air. We know about how aircraft will violate airspace or something. So it's not like it happens very often, but it can happen. They have the right to. Um, this should not be confused with the exclusive economic zone. The exclusive economic zone is up to 200 nautical miles from the baseline at which the territorial waters are measured. In these zones, the state has the right exclusively to explore and exploit natural resources that are discovered, as well as fishing rights. You can see why that would be pretty important in today's day and age, where there's a lot of offshore drilling for oil, and um, there are some precious minerals that can be found on the seabed. With these two particular portions of international law, maybe wondered how it can be enforced upon a state that has become a member to the convention. The answer can be difficult. For example, as we know in the United States, there are different judicial bodies to try different kinds of cases. For example, a small claims court would be used to adjudicate certain wrongs against individuals in order for them to receive a monetary compensation for their loss. Criminal court would be a judicial body that punishes individuals for infractions of the penal code. Also, in the international community, there are different types of judicial bodies that would adjudicate claims within the international community. For claims of different states violating the integrity of a state's exclusive economic zone, the World Trade Organization could be consulted, and they have been, used to adjudicate such things like that, particularly with trade. And that is actually one organization that the United States does submit jurisdiction to. For violating the territorial integrity of the state's territorial water boundary, the International Court of Justice could be consulted. However, it should be noted that jurisdiction is key to hearing a case against the state. If the state to which the complaint is about is not a member of the international judicial body, or they do not submit to the jurisdiction, other means of remedying the violations will have to be explored. This can come in the form of like sanctions, or a state actually does have the it could always attack or use defense in protecting their own borders. Within the international community today, there are a number of issues that are important with the context of the international law in the world's oceans and seas. One of these issues involves marine creatures and ecosystems. none more famous than in today's world as the international whaling, particularly by Japan. There are even modern television shows where there will be different ship operators who actively confront whaling operations wherever they may be. The interesting point about this story is that there is an international organization particularly designed to stop international whaling. The International Whaling Committee, however, has been unsuccessful in its attempts to stop the Japanese whalers from hunting whales. In recent years, there is a specific vigilante group that claims to be acting when the International Whaling Committee cannot. Specifically, there is an instance that the group claimed to be protecting the exclusive economic zone of Australia, although there are certain aspects to which states are allowed to collect data concerning whales. They must submit a permit to the International Whaling Committee. In this case, the government of Japan has submitted a scientific research permit for whales. In the case heard before the International Court of Justice, Australia versus Japan, concerning whaling in the Antarctic, Japan was found to be in violation of its requirements under Article 8, and the remedy for their violation is that Japan must revoke its special permits and not issue any further permits in connection with the JARPA 2 program. So the JARPA 2 program is the specific Japanese program to study whales. Another hot button issue in the scope of today's international community, the subject of piracy, is one of the dangers that ordinary fishermen face when conducting their business around failed states. Of particular note would be Somalia on the Horn of Africa. Whose responsibility is it to keep members of the international community safe on the high seas that are not under control of any state? Who should punish those pirates caught by members of the international community? International maritime law does address a large number of these issues, but it is tough to decide whether they are addressed adequately enough to deter acts of further piracy. Currently, international law states that vessels traveling on the high seas should be traveling under the flag of the state they are licensed from. In the case of pirates, they don't fly under a flag of a state. Given the example of Somali pirates, it would be difficult for the failed state of Somalia to even enforce its own laws in the country, let alone the laws of the international community. When members of a vessel commit crime, let me back up. So, with regular vessels that are traveling around that are flying under a flag, when members of that vessel commit a crime on the high seas, it is incumbent on the licensing state to hold the perpetrators accountable to their crimes. When certain regional organizations or international organizations involving cooperative security, such as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization or the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, capture a pirate on the high seas, they will generally take them to their state in order to try them for crimes that they have committed in international waters. I think that there would be benefit to an international law enforcement organization that would essentially function as a judicial system to those individuals who are captured outside the jurisdiction of a state, and to those individuals who could not be associated with any state's jurisdiction. Another way to handle these instances of maritime dispute between stateless persons or a matter of high seas misconduct would be to set up a system of security responsibility zones. These zones would have to be a joint cooperative international effort. In other words, multinational units in order to keep the interests of the world's security as opposed to the individual security of one state handling the entire responsibility. From there, in the case of failed states, there should still be an international law enforcement or judicial system that would hold them accountable for their crimes. As with the basic concepts of international law, the international law is only as strong as the states who are willing to support it. For the example, given the scenario stated above on different methods that could be used to police pirates on the high seas, assuming that there were American pirates, for example, it's unlikely that the United States would it's unlikely to submit the jurisdiction of its citizens to an international court of any kind, because it is of the utmost belief that the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law over its citizens, and that the Supreme Court of the United States is the highest court for any citizen of the United States. In conclusion, there are many gaps in the field of international law, particularly with the application of maritime law or the law of the sea. With the different issues going on in today's international community, international law can help with such issues like stopping international whaling or enforcing the international laws with concerns to marine animals. It could also be beneficial with international law to help eradicate the plague of piracy on the high seas by setting up a system of responsibility with the different states to deter, arrest, and detain pirates of stateless vessels or pirates from failed states on the Horn of Africa or elsewhere. It could provide for a judicial system for states who are unable or unwilling to hold pirates accountable. One thing is clear, that international law concerning the high seas will continue to evolve as time goes by, and it is only logical to assume that all law concerning protection of marine wildlife and anti-piracy will be beneficial to the international community. Okay, thanks. Let me know if y'all have any questions. Thanks.